Henry Allan, he was my brother, my Dutch uncle, a father, and one of my best friends. Henry Allan, 2 words. Tikkun olam, 2 Hebrew words that teach us to perform acts of loving kindness. Henry Allan, Tikkun olam, for me, they are synonymous. Henry performed his acts of loving kindness by helping others, and especially children. For him, it was and always has been about the kids. He and Billy created their Chasing the Dream Foundation to give youngsters the opportunity to chase their dreams, that initially helped 755 children chase their dreams to become athletes, musical artists, doctors, scientists, and educators. The foundation continues today to help at least 44 children each year chase their dreams with the help of the Boys and Girls Clubs forever. That foundation today has endowed scholarships at 18 mostly HBCUs throughout the country and helping more than 70 students this semester chase their dreams, and now every semester forever. Henry has left us with a gift of memories, but more important is what Henry and Billy have left the children forever. Their right to chase their dreams. He has taught us how to care for others before ourselves. And as we are all aware, whenever you called Henry, he ignored our first question of how he is doing, instead insisting on first knowing how we were doing, how our family was, how the grandkids are. And Billy is the same way. Yesterday, with everything going on, she called me to ask me to do something. But she first wanted to know if I was okay. I didn't answer that honestly because things are not okay, and I am sad. For Henry, it was always about others, not himself, about trying to find ways to support the foundation so that it could help the kids through the foundation. We never talked about how much he could charge for an appearance or a signing. It was how many more scholarships we could create and how many more kids we could help. He has taught me so much, by word, by deed, but most of all, by quiet action. In his own words, I hope I have set a pattern in life not only for my kids, but for all the people in the world, that if you try a little harder, no matter how large an obstacle might be, you can succeed. I don't want any kid, no matter who they are, to think I can't do it. The fact is, they can do anything they want to do. 44 forever. Zichrono livracha. May his memory be for a blessing. Amen. And now, I would like you to hear from one of those original Dream Chaser kids, now a very grown-up kid, Kiana Lewis. In middle school, we supported her dream to become a harpist, then on to Fisk University to receive a psychology pre-med degree, Phi Beta Kappa, then a master's from Yale University in public health, and currently in the PhD program at Johns Hopkins University in adolescent health. Kiana.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Aaron, the Aaron family, and other guests. My name is Kiana Joyce Marcellus Lewis, and I am a dream chaser. I represent a special body of highly motivated young people who are pursuing their dreams due to the financial support and encouragement provided by the Chasing the Dreams Foundation. Mr. Aaron believed every child should have the opportunity to strengthen their talents, so he and Mrs. Aaron used their money and influence to ensure young people with a passion for something did not face financial barriers to achieve their goals. Over 3 decades, they have supported thousands of young people across the country in fields such as music, sports, performing arts, and education. We are dream achievers. Mr. Aaron's investments early in life provided so many youth the springboard they needed to realize their dreams. For example, Leah Young knew at a young age that she had a passion for acting and now is a professional actress. Mason Morton started as a young boy with a natural talent for music, and now he is a premier harpist and tours with his group Sons of Serendip. Kari Joyner, who once dreamt of professionally playing the cello, is now a world-renowned cellist who has played for many dignitaries, including President Barack Obama. I met Mr. Aaron when I was 12 years old. After he learned I wanted to learn how to play the harp from my middle school music teacher, Mrs. Rosalind Lewis. Because of his philanthropy, I trained for years with the principal harpist of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. It was an experience few other youth, especially Black youth, could say they had at that time. At an early age, this experience confirmed for me that no opportunity was beyond my reach. It is one thing to be told that anything is possible, but it's completely different when you're shown. As my interests evolved, the Aaron support evolved as well, but their message stayed the same. Always chase your dreams. Throughout each stage of my academic and professional career, Mr. and Mrs. Aaron were always there. They provided me with unforgettable opportunities to travel and speak before civil rights icons, presidents, political figures, celebrities, and business moguls. Because of them, I have had dinner with legends who've spent their careers beating odds and breaking barriers. Mr. and Mrs. Aaron showed me what it means to surround yourself with people who have the drive to make their dreams a reality as well. While our relationship started as philanthropy, it evolved into family. The last time I saw Mr. Aaron was New Year's Eve, 2019. Every year, he and Mrs. Aaron host a New Year's Eve party where they invite family and friends to their home to reflect upon the past year and express hopes for the new year. That year was particularly special because I introduced him to my fiance. Like grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Aaron asked him to stand before the crowd and introduce himself and state his intentions. They told him that I was a dream chaser, so he better be chasing his dreams as well. He later personally met Mr. Aaron for an official handshake of approval. That was truly special. History will remember Mr. Aaron as a record-breaking athlete, but I will always remember him as the man that opened countless doors for me and others to chase our dreams. We are dream multipliers. Today, in memory of our great benefactor, Henry Aaron, our special League of Dream Chasers commits itself to continuing the dream and achieving our greatness. We will also stoke the flames of unusual possibilities in the hearts and minds of other young people, much like they did us. Mr. Aaron, thank you for your example. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your love. Rest in peace.